All right, welcome to another deep dive, you guys.
I am excited.
Yeah, this is going to be good.
Yeah,
So we are going deep into Mo's dating life. And wow, do we have sources for this one?
we do.
This is exciting.
Yeah, we got his interview on sticky situations and then
Yeah, it was such a good episode.
so good.
And then we've also got his dating profile.
Oh, I love when we have dating profiles.
Yeah, it's like you get to see how someone presents themselves versus like how they actually are.
Exactly, like what they say they want versus what they're actually doing out in the world.
Totally. So to start this whole thing off, we got to introduce Mo a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So Mo, he's 40 years old, living in Chicago.
Okay.
And he helps experts create online courses, which I think is so interesting.
It's very meta.
Yeah.
Creating courses about creating courses.
Totally. Very cool. Very like modern age.
Mm-hmm.
And he describes himself as exuberant and playful, maybe even a little quirky.
I like that.
And I think that really does come through in his profile too.
It does. Yeah. And speaking of his profile, I think we should jump into that.
Yeah, let's do it.
He's upfront about wanting a serious long-term relationship. He even mentions wanting to find his Shabbat bride.
Oh, wow. So he's looking to settle down.
It seems like it. But he also emphasizes that he's not in a rush, which I think is a good sign.
Definitely. It shows he's patient,
Uh-huh.
which I think in the dating world you kind of have to be.
Yeah, especially at 40.
So in his profile, he says he's looking for someone independent, passionate, and who can keep up with his banter.
So basically, he wants someone who's like their own person, but can also like have fun with him.
Totally, like an equal partner.
Exactly.
Someone who can challenge him intellectually and emotionally.
It makes sense. He's a smart guy, successful, probably needs someone who can keep him on his toes a little bit.
For sure. And he also mentions wanting to be met, seen, heard, and held. Like those are his words.
Ooh, that's deep. It sounds like he's really craving a deep connection.
Right. It's not just about checking boxes. Like he wants to be understood on a deeper level.
Absolutely. And that kind of vulnerability is really refreshing to see in a dating profile, like he's putting himself out there.
Totally agree. But then we get to his actual dating stories and we see some interesting, I don't know, contradictions maybe.
Oh, tell me more.
So he says he values taking things slow,
Okay.
but some of his first dates are these elaborate multi-stop adventures. Like he planned a whole date around this woman's love of hard root beer.
Wow.
Yeah, they had root beer floats, went to a store that specialized in like gourmet root beers.
Okay, that's kind of cute.
It is cute.
But also a lot for a first date.
Right. Like it makes you wonder, is he trying to impress too much? Is he compensating for something?
Maybe he's just a really enthusiastic dater.
I mean, that's possible, but it could also be a sign of some deeper insecurities, like he's trying to prove himself.
That's a good point.
And then there's the infamous NSFW art gallery date.
Oh, yeah, I heard about this one.
So he accidentally walks into this gallery, doesn't realize it's like super explicit,
Oh.
and then he feels too awkward to leave because he doesn't want to be rude.
I've been there. It's so uncomfortable.
Right. And it just shows, again, that he's conflict avoidant.
Big time.
Like he'd rather endure this super cringy situation than risk hurting someone's feelings by saying, hey, this isn't really my scene.
Yeah, and that can be a problem in relationships, right? Like, if you're always avoiding conflict, things can build up and explode later on.
Exactly. It's important to be able to communicate openly and honestly.
For sure.
But then to contrast that, he also has this story about a scary date, is what he called her, who basically tricked him into going to couples therapy on their 5th date.
Wait, what?
Yeah, he thought they were just going to like a regular therapy session, like for himself.
As you do on a 5th date.
And then he gets there and it's a couples therapist and he's like, what's going on?
Oh my God, that's wild.
It is wild.
And what did he do?
Well, he went along with it because, again, conflict avoidant.
Of course.
But this whole situation really highlights the importance of boundaries.
Totally. Like, you need to be able to say no and set limits, especially early on in a relationship.
Otherwise, you can end up in some pretty crazy situations.
Like couples therapy on a 5th date.
Yes, exactly.
But hey, at least it makes for a good story.
That's true. It definitely does.
So we've got this conflict avoidant guy who sometimes goes overboard on first dates and ends up in couples therapy against his will. What else have we got?
Well, he also has this no ghosting policy.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he tells this story about a woman who rejected him, but she actually called him to explain why.
Wow, that's rare.
It is rare.
Like most people just disappear into the digital ether.
Totally. And he said that experience really impacted him. It showed him that you can be honest and direct without being cruel.
That's a really good lesson. I think a lot of people could learn from that.
For sure, and it makes sense given his background.
Oh, right, the dating app.
Yeah, he actually built a dating app. Like, he was super into the whole data-driven approach to dating.
So he was like optimizing his profile, analyzing algorithms, all that jazz.
Exactly. Like, he was approaching dating like a science experiment.
Wow, that's so different from how he seems now.
Right. Like, now he's all about intuition, connection, taking things slow.
It's like he's gone from engineer to philosopher.
I love that. It's so true.
So what happened? What made him change his approach?
That's a good question.
Like, did he get burned out on the whole data thing? Did he realize it wasn't fulfilling?
I think it's probably a combination of things, but it's definitely an interesting evolution to explore.
It is, and I think it speaks to a larger trend we're seeing in the dating world.
What do you mean?
Well, people are getting tired of the whole swipe happy hookup culture thing.
You think so?
I do, yeah. I think there's a growing desire for something more meaningful, more substantial.
Like, people are craving genuine connection.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Mo seems to be on that same wavelength, even if he stumbles along the way.
He's definitely not perfect.
Nobody is.
But he's putting himself out there, and he's learning from his experiences.
And that's all we can ask for, right?
Absolutely.
Well, this is fascinating. I can't wait to dive deeper into Mo's story and see what other insights we can uncover.
Me too. This is going to be good.
I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, for sure. Stay tuned, folks, because Mo's dating life is about to get a whole lot more interesting.
Buckle up.
This is going to be a wild ride. Yeah, and it's like he's almost coming full circle, you know?
I see what you mean.
From like that super analytical approach to something that's much more intuitive.
Yeah, like he's learned that you can't just hack your way to love.
Exactly. You can't just like optimize your profile and expect the perfect match to magically appear.
It takes more than that.
Right. It takes effort, vulnerability, and like a willingness to put yourself out there.
And to make mistakes.
Yeah, definitely.
Like, nobody's perfect at dating. We all stumble along the way.
Speaking of stumbling, there's that story about the date who brought him homemade Japanese cookies.
Oh, yeah, the one who was really into mindfulness.
Yeah, and he was like totally smitten with her.
There's always a but.
But he admitted that he started overthinking things.
Like what?
Like, he was making all these rules in his head about how many times he should text her, when he should call, like all this stuff.
Oh, I hate when I do that.
Right. It's like you're sabotaging yourself before anything even happens.
Totally. And it sounds like he recognized that he was doing that.
Yeah, he was like, I was creating all these unnecessary obstacles.
Which is huge. Like, the first step to changing a behavior is being aware of it.
Exactly. And it shows that he's like self-aware enough to recognize his own patterns.
Yeah, he's not just blaming the algorithm or whatever.
He's taking responsibility for his own actions.
And his own thoughts.
Which is so important in dating, but also just in life in general.
Totally. Like, we all have our own baggage, our own hang-ups.
But the key is to be mindful of them and try to work through them.
Otherwise, they'll keep popping up and messing things up.
So we've got Mo, overthinking king, trying to navigate the dating world.
And being honest about it.
And being honest about it, which I appreciate.
Me too. It makes him relatable.
And then we get to his long-distance dating phase.
Ooh, tell me more.
So during the pandemic, he connected with this woman online.
Okay.
And they had all these like super romantic virtual dates.
Like what kind of dates?
They toured Paris together on Google Earth. They cooked together over video chat.
Oh, that's cute.
I know, right? And they even had virtual movie nights.
It sounds like they really made an effort to connect.
Yeah, even though they were miles apart.
It shows that he's willing to adapt, to be creative, to make things work.
Totally. And it also speaks to the power of technology.
How so?
Well, like 10 years ago, this kind of relationship wouldn't have been possible.
True, they wouldn't have been able to have those virtual experiences.
But now with all the technology we have, you can really build a connection with someone, even if you're physically far away.
So did they ever meet in person?
They did eventually. It
Right.
wasn't the same.
Oh no, the dreaded in-person letdown.
Yeah, they met halfway, spent a weekend together.
And the sparks just weren't there.
Not in the same way.
Which makes sense, right? Like, online chemistry doesn't always translate to real life.
Exactly. It's easy to idealize someone when you're only interacting with them through a screen.
You're not seeing the whole picture.
And you're not getting those like subtle cues that you pick up on when you're physically present with someone.
Like body language, pheromones, all that stuff.
Yeah, and to Mo's credit, he recognized that.
So he didn't try to force it.
No, he ended things pretty quickly.
Good for him.
It shows that he's not afraid to walk away from a situation that's not right, even if it's disappointing.
Which is a sign of maturity, for sure.
Okay, so we've talked about Mo's evolution as a dater.
The overthinking, The long-distance saga.
But there's one big piece of the puzzle we haven't really addressed yet.
What's that?
His Jewish identity.
Oh, right. He mentioned that in his profile.
Yeah, he talks about hosting Shabbat dinners, being active in Jewish groups.
So it's clearly an important part of his life.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, how does that influence his dating choices?
Yeah, is he looking for someone who shares his religious beliefs?
Or is it more about cultural compatibility?
Those are good questions.
And we know he's looking for a serious relationship, maybe even marriage.
So it makes sense that his religious and cultural background would be a factor.
He even compares dating in his 30s to traditional Orthodox dating.
Really?
Yeah, where deal breakers and values are discussed up front.
Which is interesting because, on the one hand, it shows that he's serious about finding a partner who's compatible with his lifestyle.
But on the other hand, it could also be seen as a bit intense.
Like too much pressure too soon.
Right, it's all about finding that balance.
Being authentic without being overwhelming.
And that's something Mo's still figuring out, just like the rest of us.
Exactly. Dating is a journey, not a destination.
And Mo's journey is definitely full of surprises.
Hmm.
All right, so last time we left off with Mo in couples therapy.
On a 5th date, can you imagine?
What was going through his head? I would have just walked out.
Right. I mean, talk about a red flag.
Major red flag, but Mo, being Mo, he just kind of went with it.
Classic conflict avoidance.
Totally, and it's interesting because even though he's obviously uncomfortable, he's still respectful of the therapist.
Yeah, he even says in the interview that he didn't want to create a scene.
Right, he's trying to be polite even though he's basically been ambushed.
Yeah. So what happens next? Does he just sit there in stunned silence?
Well, he does voice his concerns to the therapist.
He's like, I think there's been a misunderstanding.
Pretty much, and this is where things take a turn.
Ooh. Tell me more.
So the therapist, to her credit, actually sides with Mo.
What? Like she calls out her own client?
Yeah, she's like, it's not really appropriate to bring someone to couples therapy without their consent.
Oof, that's got to be awkward.
It was big time. The date, she did not take it well.
I bet she didn't.
According to Mo, she just completely lost it.
Like a full-on meltdown.
Pretty much, she started ranting about all her past relationship baggage, blaming Mo for things that clearly had nothing to do with him.
Projecting all over the place.
Exactly, and the therapist is just sitting there well, this escalated quickly.
I wonder if she regretted siding with Mo at that point.
Probably, but it's a good reminder that sometimes people's true colors don't show until you're in a situation like that.
Totally, stress can bring out the worst in people.
So, therapy session implodes. What happens next?
Does Mo make a run for it?
He wishes. No, she drives him back to his car in complete silence.
That sounds excruciating.
He said it was the longest car ride of his life. Ghost town. He never heard from her again.
Wow, so much for no ghosting.
Right. It's she went from 0 to 60 to ghost in an hour.
I mean, at that point, I think ghosting is warranted.
Yeah, I don't blame him for not wanting to see her again after that.
It's just wild. You go on a date hoping for a connection and you end up in a therapy session from hell.
Mo's dating life is full of surprises, that's for sure.
So we've covered a lot of ground with Mo.
We've seen his dating profile, heard his stories, analyzed his choices.
From dating for data to overthinking to couples therapy on a 5th date.
What a journey.
And I think there's a lot we can learn from his experiences.
Yeah, what are some of the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, first of all, I think Mo's story shows us that dating is messy.
It's not always going to be smooth sailing.
There are going to be awkward moments, miscommunications, disappointments.
And that's okay.
It's all part of the process.
And I think the important thing is to be open to learning from those experiences.
Like Mo has.
Yeah, he's definitely evolved a lot over time.
He's gone from this super analytical approach to something that's much more intuitive and heart-centered.
And he's not afraid to be vulnerable, to put himself out there, even when it's scary.
Which is inspiring, I think.
It is, and it reminds us that we're all in this together.
We're all just trying to figure things out, one awkward date at a time.
Exactly. So to wrap things up, I want to pose a question to our listener.
Ooh, I love a good question.
Knowing all that you now know about Mo,
his quirks, his values, his dating misadventures.
what kind of date would you plan for him?
If you were trying to win his heart, what would you do?
Think about it and let us know.
We want to hear your ideas.
And remember, this deep dive is all about making you the expert.
Next time, it's your sources we'll be exploring.
So stay tuned and happy dating, everyone.